Hey guys, it's Spoonie, and unfortunately the creative industry tends to attract a lot of weirdos, and the comic book industry is certainly no exception. Now, I've done a video before where I showcased a couple people. So a user in the comments section of the last video, named Tyson LaFrance 9203, pointed out that the first person I'm going to talk about in this video, actually, Ed Piskor, there's some stuff happened with him earlier this year in 2024. Okay, so the video I've been sort of showing off here, Hip Hop Family Tree, is probably his best known work. It is basically sort of a comic book telling of the origins of hip hop. It sort of covers the birth and evolution of like rap music and stuff like that. The art's very unique, and he later on did a series for Marvel, X-Men Grand Design, where he apparently condensed like 50 years worth of X-Men continuity into, I think it was 3 2-issue miniseries. I think the first one covered like the 60s and 70s, then the 80s, and then the 90s. So this is Ed Piskor here, and what ended up happening is that a number of women came forward accusing him of fostering inappropriate relationships as well as trying to trade favors for career advancement. Now, it gets kind of dark because in response to this, now you can see the article I'm looking at here does have some of the texts and leaked DMs. I'm sure those are available if you want to track them down. Essentially what happened though was, faced with all this stuff, he had an upcoming art show canceled and a lot of other stuff, and he decided to take his own life. Now, before he did that, he did leave a note. I'm not going to go into the full thing here. He posted it to Facebook, and somebody saved it as a Google Doc. I can leave the link in the description if you are curious about it. Essentially, he denies some of this stuff, but then he admits to some of the other stuff, but tries to say that, without the proper context. He says, like, oh, the woman came on to him initially, and you know what, it is kind of a he said, she said kind of thing. I do get that his life was kind of going down the drain because art was his passion and his career, and he was losing opportunities and stuff like that. But I feel like, I don't know, to me that doesn't feel like the actions of somebody who's innocent. Like, wouldn't you want to fight these accusations? Like, I sure as hell wouldn't want to be called like a liar and an abuser, because I'm not. So yeah, if you go through his letter, you can see here he talks about he was about to sign a $75,000 deal, which fell apart. This guy apparently also had a popular YouTube channel called Cartoonist Kayfabe, and the guy he ran it with, apparently when these accusations come out, he just severed all professional ties with him, which makes sense because, those kind of accusations can really drag down the people around you. So financially, he was in ruin. From his perspective, some of the people closest to him in life were turning their backs on him, and so he did what he did. Now, again, it's not for me to debate whether this was the right answer or not. Certainly, I think if he committed a crime, he owes the time. So whether this guy actually is a criminal or not, that's to be debated. Like I said, he copped to some of this stuff, but the truth is always somewhere in the middle. Like, there's my story, your story, and then somewhere in between is the truth. I think this is definitely one of those stories, but you can let me know what you think. Okay, now for the second person on this list, he goes by the name of Greg Brooks. He's a former penciler for DC. He did a few issues here and there, as you can see, for DC. He did the Crimson Avenger miniseries in the late 80s. This was sort of after they had rebooted with Crisis on Infinite Earths. So they decided to reboot some of these. The Crimson Avenger is actually, I think, the oldest costumed hero, even predating like Superman and stuff like that. So, they wanted to, I think, take advantage of the fact that he was not in the public domain yet. As you can see, it's written by Roy and Danny Thomas, so at least it was probably a really solid story. So yeah, he wrote sorry, I keep saying wrong. He drew the first 4 issues of that, or the only 4 issues, I should say. And then he did a couple Star Trek books for them. Secret Origins Volume 2, number 26. He actually did the part for Black Lightning, written with the character's creator, Tony Isabella. And there you got Roy Thomas again for Miss America, because he did amazing work with those Golden Age characters. Anyways, so this guy, Greg Brooks, he was married to a person named Elizabeth Kessler. Now, she actually also worked in comics briefly. It seems like she really only did one thing that was sort of noteworthy, and that was the 9th issue of Doom Patrol, the 80s series. Now, it would have been about a dozen issues before Grant Morrison took over. So, I think the book wasn't at its, it certainly hadn't hit the levels it would. And like I said, she just did the coloring for this. So what ended up happening is, unfortunately, this guy, Greg Brooks, killed his wife, Elizabeth Kessler. Now, if you go to, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with Bob Rozakis, he did a lot of work writing for DC. I don't know if you guys know Amazing Man. He created that character in the 80s. It was kind of like a joke character, superhero. He was also known as DC's Answer Man for a few decades, kind of having an encyclopedic knowledge of all of DC's properties and continuity and stuff like that. Anyways, this guy Bob Rozakis wrote more detail about exactly what happened with Greg Brooks. And you can see he wrote for the Comics Bulletin back in September of 2002. I believe this link is dead. But just to sort of summarize some of the stuff he wrote, he lived on Staten Island with his wife and baby, Elizabeth Kessler, who also worked for DC. And she went missing. Her body was eventually found at a construction site a mile from their home. She had been beaten with a hammer and left there. And now it says that it turns out the two had been having problems in their relationship, and she started going with another guy. It says she returned for her things, got into an argument with Brooks, and while the baby was in the room, she started to brag about what a better man this new guy was. And apparently he, in a heat of the moment, grabbed the hammer and hit her over the head, and she died. It says he stored her in the bathtub until the morning, when he could sort of leave with the body and not be noticed. And so he was charged and convicted and went to prison. But there's an even more interesting aspect to that story. So his former wife, Elizabeth Kessler, wasn't actually Elizabeth Kessler. It turns out she had appropriated the name of her college roommate, who was named Elizabeth Kessler, when she had moved to the East Coast, moving from Kansas. And so I think her real identity isn't publicly known. And apparently Rozakis says that her mother ended up taking custody of their baby. And if this whole thing is kind of creepy to you, it gets even worse with the good folks at DC here. So yeah, articles about him. That's just an example of some of his work. If you're curious, it seems like he did some decent penciling, so it's a shame he's a piece of shit. Okay, so occasionally DC used to publish these little strips within their regular titles, Cap's Hobby Hints, where they just kind of little funny things about different small scenarios. Anyways, we've got this one that's kid stubs his thumb. I always had a problem driving nails with a hammer. Mr. Cap showed me a neat way. I take a pocket comb, use it to hold the nail, and that way I hit the nail and not my fingers. Thanks for the tip. And this is attributed to Lee Travis of Cleveland, Ohio. Now, Lee Travis was the real identity of that character, the Crimson Avenger, who was drawn by Mark Brooks. And you might think, well, that's kind of a weird coincidence, right? And if you think about it, so they show, like, what do you use a comb for? You use it for your head, right? You use it for the hair on your head. So a hammer with the comb, it wasn't just suggesting something. The person who actually approved this, who was an editor at the time, and who is a fantastic writer, but a really whiny person on the internet, the person who greenlit this was Mark Waid. Now, here's an excerpt from an interview he did back in 2013. So he says, as time passed, I would joke about it around the office, trying to make light of something that was clearly too horrible for me to wrap my mind around, and thus begin the end of my brief editorial career. That comic strip was the final nail in the coffin. So he was doing a reprint of DC Christmas specials, reprinting some Silver Age stuff, and he put in some like half-page fillers, and one of these was this retro-themed like comic strip or whatever. And he decided to use this as a way to, I really don't know, make fun of the situation, like he says, to some creepy degree. He says, to his credit, he refrained from writing the letter as a thank you to Greg Brooks, but he says he could not let the issue go. And so they suggested, well, how about Lee Travis, because that's the identity of the character that he's been drawing. So, he admits now this was poor taste to even do this thing in the first place. So eventually, like months or a year afterwards, it says, it finally got sort of noticed, and then who was at the time editor Paul Levitz gave him a choice of basically Mark Waid could take a month of unpaid leave, or he could do 40 hours of community service to pay off his ethical debt to the company. He chose to do the community service, but in retrospect he says he should have said, call me in a month. Now, maybe that's true. Maybe in the position he's in now he could say that, but back then he was still an editor. He had yet to touch The Flash or Kingdom Come or any of the other great stuff he's known for. So, I mean, this was a horrible situation, and this guy who knew both of these people, he knew Elizabeth as a colorist and he knew Brooks as a writer, apparently didn't care for the guy. And then in the wake of what this guy had done, I don't know, I guess he felt it was appropriate to make fun. Like I said, Mark Waid is not the best human being, but as far as I know, he's just a preachy, whiny guy. He isn't like any of the people in these videos. Which leads me to the last guy in the video, who is actually like one of the worst people I've ever read about, comics or not. This guy's name is Len Lawson. He is an artist from Australia. He worked on the Australian version of a comic book called Action Comics. He created a number of Western heroes. Specifically, you can see the Lone Avenger here. Apparently was his most famous creation. The Lone Avenger, I believe, ended up dominating, becoming the main character of Action Comics. but then he also created another Western character that ended up becoming really popular, the Hooded Rider. Now, if you kind of see his artwork here, you can see it's like typical classic Golden Age style artwork. Now, let me get into this because this is a whole mess. So he was born in 1927. So he would have been involved in that golden age of comics. It says his one of his first issues was in 1946, where he created the Lone Avenger character. He Okay, so this is where it gets not good. So in the year 1954, he, in addition to being a famous cartoonist, he was also a notable photographer. So it says he took 5 models to take some swimsuit photos for a calendar. He ended up restraining all of them and assaulting them, and he actually went all the way with 2 of them. He ended up getting sentenced to the death sentence, but they then soon after that had happened, they abolished the death sentence in New South Wales, Australia. So his sentence was commuted to 14 years in prison. Obviously, the publisher stopped giving him any kind of work, wanted nothing to do with him. Now, he actually did serve about 7 years, so he served about half of his sentence and then was released. And the fact that I'm still going tells you that this story gets worse. Okay, so he got out of prison in 1961. Now, in 1962, so maybe a year, probably slightly less, it says he assaulted and then murdered a 16-year-old whom he had lured into his apartment to paint her portrait. And then apparently the day after that, he took a ton of hostages at a girls' school, and he killed a 15-year-old girl in the chaos. He was then again sentenced, this time to life imprisonment. Now, you figure the guy's behind bars, what more could happen? So at some point, a dance troupe came in to perform for some inmates. He attacked one of the dancers, one of the female dancers. They say it was seemingly part of an escape attempt. But this woman was so traumatized by the attack, she, 6 years later, chose to end herself. So, in addition to multiple assaults, this guy has killed 2 people, and his actions led to the death of a 3rd person. Like I said, this is one of the foulest stories. Like, I know in my last video I talked a little bit about Blake Leibel, and while his crime was absolutely gruesome and completely horrifying, the fact is, sadly, you can say at least he only had 1 victim. This guy, like, okay, so here's his timeline. Famous artist, uses that to get some young girls alone, and he abuses them. He goes to jail. They're going to kill him, but then the state decides, you know what, death penalty is too brutal. We're just going to give him time. Now, he does time for good behavior. He gets out, and what does he do? A year later, he assaults and murders another young girl, and then he goes to a girls' elementary school, and he takes a bunch of hostages, he kills another girl, and he goes to prison for life for this. And it doesn't end there. Once he's in prison, he somehow is able to assault yet another woman, and apparently it was so horrific and she was so scarred by the incident that she took her own life from it. So, yeah, for me, Len Lawson is probably one of the worst people to ever work in comic books. Now, as you can see, if you've watched my other video, a lot of these people tend to be from Western comics. I'm sure there are people like UK creators that might be involved in some stuff, or I'm even less familiar with the manga industry and some of their creators. If you guys know anything about either of those, feel free to shout them out so I can look into it just because I'm curious and, maybe I can make another video if I find anything interesting. Otherwise, yeah, try to keep your eyes out for stuff by these creators. As you like, the Ed Piskor thing is kind of sad because I liked what I read of the Hip Hop Family Tree, and I at some point was hoping that I could check this out. But I mean, I don't know. You separate the art from the artist, and I really like the subject material. Um, I guess I won't go out of my way to get it, but you know. Alright, guys, thank you so much for taking the time, and I hope you'll come back for the next one.